What's up, the generation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. This is the College Basketball Conference Tournament Betting Preview Part 3. Today, I will be talking with Jordan Majewski in just a second on the Missouri Valley Arch Madness. I'll also talk with Sam Federman about the MAAC. And then Duck and Breeze will carry you out with the WCC and SoCon. All right, let's get started. Let's bring Jordan in here. All right, now bringing in a college basketball legend. Used to work for us at Action, now does great work on his staring at the floorboards blog that I'm a loyal subscriber to, and over at Basket Review. Nobody else you want to follow for March more than Jordan at JorCubsDan on Twitter. And no, especially when it comes to the Valley, there's no one else I'd rather talk to. Jordan, what's going on, brother? Happy March.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, let's.
Love talking Arch Madness.
It's nothing better. By the way, do you think so? If you look historically, everyone's going to talk about the Valley unders, right? Like it was like, hey, the market's catching up. Then last year they went 10-1. The three biggest under tournaments. One that really makes sense to me. I talked with Sam last night for God way too long, but I love him. Boardwalk Hall unders there are have been a cash cow. I mean that there's like a stage. It's like a cavern, so that kind of makes sense.
Right.
The Summit at the new Sanford Center that they have it at actually has been a under cash cow. Historically, 26-12 to the under by about 5 points per game.
That's
Uh,
tough for that league to go under too.
I know, like I'm like, do I really want to look at unders in that league? And the MAAC, that makes sense with all of those offenses and no tempo. But the Valley, obviously, do you think it's the gym? Is it the coaching? Is it the familiarity? Is it just a lot of some randomness in there?
Yeah, I've been to several Arch Madnesses and I never think, I've been in gyms where I'm like, oh, I can see why this is a horrible shooting backdrop or whatever. I don't feel that way at Arch Madness. I don't know what it is exactly, but yeah, I think it's just the nature of typical Valley Slugfest basketball too.
Yep. All right, well, let's dive into the bracket. Belmont won the regular season. They are the favorite about plus 165. Your second favorite, interestingly enough, at some books, is UNI, who we'll get to. And the crazy thing about that is that they don't have a bye. They will be playing on the opening day. Nobody in Valley history has ever won the tournament coming from opening day. Valpo in 2020 got there as a 7 seed but didn't win it. Recently, this tournament has been pretty chalky. 1 versus 2 and 4 of the past 5 Valley Conference tournaments. But I guess we'll start at the top and then work our way down. So yeah, let's start the 8 versus 9 game. Winner will get Belmont, Southern Illinois, Drake. Drake, I mean, what happened to them down the stretch? They lost 9 straight to end the year. It was a brand new team with a new coach, right? They lost everything.
Right.
They showed some promise early in the year. They'll take on an SIU team who they split during the regular season, and Drake doesn't let you get in transition. They don't turn it over. The SIU offense can be pretty ugly in the half court. They did turn SIU into jump shooters, which is what you want to do. The game that
Right.
SIU won, they went 10 of 26 from three. The game they lost, they went 3 of 26
Three
from
and
three.
26. Right.
Is this like a, hey, decent matchup, season renewed feeling, and Drake can pick off SIU here, or are they dead?
Yeah, I mean they've lost nine straight coming in. I think there's a lot of issues. Jalen, their best player, got benched for a little bit. Was a little bit doghoused by Henderson. But yeah, they underscreen everything. They're going to turn SIU into jump shooters, which is horrible for SIU. And as you mentioned, like you're reading straight from my notes here, 3 for 26 in the loss, 10 for 26 in the win from three. So, but yeah, SIU is physical, athletic, fast, and they kind of fit the bill of the, Arch Madness slugfest team who, wins the ugly games. And I think if you're Belmont, you definitely want to see Drake win instead of SIU.
So yeah, I don't think that Drake would really pose many problems to Belmont, but the physicality of SIU, it's an elite defense.
Right.
They And the offense is ugly. It's a lot of mid-range from House, and they can't really shoot from the outside.
Right.
But SIU's physicality, if they can turn you over, and Belmont can be turned over. I mean, it's amazing the Belmont offense we'll get to in a sec. They lost Nick McClain early in the season. Jack Smiley's been a revelation, but they will turn it over. They have a couple guys that'll struggle at the line, some of their bigs, but can SIU just get into them physically and cause Belmont some issues, or do you think Belmont passes that test?
Yeah, I mean that's the two regular season matchups. Belmont definitely struggled with their speed and physicality. House didn't even play in the second game, and they still were leading late in the second half in that one. But yeah, Belmont went 8 for 37 from three, I think, in those two games, two of their worst shooting games of the year. Um, so yeah, that's definitely something that gave Belmont some issues. Just it was kind of speed versus skill and precision, speed and athleticism versus skill and precision there.
Yeah.
And Belmont's shooting in the past two Arch Madnesses. Let me see. I think they're 31 for 102 from three. So that's 30% the last two Valley tournaments, and they shot about that against SIU twice this year. The difference is for Belmont, they can score at the rim this year. They're way more. They're 10% more efficient on 2-point offense, and they're 96th percentile in rim efficiency. Last year they were 56th percentile in rim efficiency. So they've got some offensive recourse for St. Louis shooting this year.
Yeah. And another thing that could work in their favor in that is that just to really score on Belmont, unless you're turning them over and scoring in transition, you have to score over the top of them. And they're going to
Right.
give up a ton of threes, but their rim defense is elite this year.
Exactly. Yeah. They've got depth in the front court this year. Legitimate, big guys, and it was just really the speed that SIU plays with that gave Belmont some issues.
Yeah. Well, if we assume that Belmont passes a grinder, SIU won't make it easy. It gets to the semis on March 7th. They'll take on the winner of Murray State UIC. Fascinating game. This game will probably be like threes versus twos. If Murray's
Right.
making their threes, then it might be problematic for UIC. But I will say UIC is the one team that intrigues me in this from an odds perspective at around 10 to 1. If you go back to since January 4th per Torvik, they're the second best team in the league. And the reason I use that date is that's when Elijah Crawford, their best player, returned from injury. And they got swept by Murray State this year. Murray State scored 81 in both meetings. Crawford played one total minute in those games. He got kicked out 1 minute in, and then he missed the first meeting before he
Exactly.
returned from injury. They're very athletic. They have an elite defense. They'll force turnovers, crash the offensive glass. Again, when you describe them, there's a lot of similarities to SIU. They can't shoot threes, and then like UIC, despite when they played Belmont this year, UIC got swept by Belmont, but one was without Crawford, and they still led by double digits in the second half. And the other, it was close, and they shot 3 of 18 from three. And Belmont in both meetings shot, I think, close to 50% from three. I think they can
Right.
turn Belmont over. Their physicality can cause them issues. And the reason I bring that up is because I've given up on Murray State having a chance against Belmont. I thought, they were up 20 at home and
Yeah.
blew it. There's just something about that matchup. I think UIC has the better chance. There's just something wrong with it. I mean, Murray has talent. They have shot makers. I love Doman, but there's something about that matchup that just it doesn't seem to go well for them. But what are you seeing in that 4-5? And then who do you think has the better chance to take out Belmont?
Yeah. Murray's probably best two games of the Valley were against UIC, but as you mentioned, Elijah Crawford was, not existent in either of those. And ironically, I think UIC could give Belmont issues, but they also play like a lot of double teams and traps, which in those non-turnover possessions, if they don't get a turnover against Belmont, they're giving up wide open shots that
Yep.
way. And that's what exactly happened in the regular season when the Belmont swept them, that they were able to just, pick them apart with catch and shoots when they were able to, handle those traps and double teams out of the post and ball screen. So I agree. I've given up on Murray State, but that's a talent level that's kind of unmatched in the Valley as well, with the mismatches they can create with Damone on the ball. Fred King is a post beast. They're such a horrible on-ball defense, though. Their drop coverage is, non-existent. And so I think, like we mentioned earlier, ironically, I think the biggest issue for Belmont in that top half of the bracket is SIU.
So you think SIU has a better chance than UIC?
Yeah, I do.
I mean,
Unless
UIC will have to
Belmont's
rely
just
on.
ice cold in St. Louis again,
Yeah,
because they just got wide open three after wide open three when they were able to, because they moved the ball so well against their UIC's traps and doubles.
yeah. I mean, that's what UIC has to hope for. It's turn them over and then hope they miss threes.
Turn them over, cold shooting night, exactly.
Yeah, Belmont won 26 of 56, 46%, which isn't like way over expectation. I mean, this is an
Right.
elite shooting team. By the way,
Yeah, but
if yeah,
yeah, the thing, like I mentioned earlier with Belmont, they're so good at the rim this year, though. I think this year they're 7-1 when they're shooting sub 30% from three. Last 2 years they're 6-8 in that regard. So
yeah.
they can win games this year without being a precision offense like they typically are.
All right, let's move to the. So who do you ultimately think comes out of the top? Do you think it's Belmont?
Belmont up. If I'm upset minded, getting crazy. SIU.
All right, let's move to the bottom half of the bracket. 7-10 game Valpo, Indiana State. I know you're extremely close with Indiana State.
Yeah.
They had some injuries this year. Valpo won a ton of close games down the stretch, including and until the finale when they lost the buzzer to Evansville. But so they closed the year strong, but they won a ton of close games, including two versus Indiana State by one and one in overtime. Any feel in that game? And I don't think either one of those teams is a threat to get to the final. But any thoughts there?
Yeah, Valpo gives me a little interest because they made a run last year playing this kind of same style of booty ball, which is perfect for, if everyone's going to be clanking threes in St. Louis, they're kind of the antithesis of that. They, pretty much out physicaled Indiana State, who's the opposite. They're still trying to run a shirt style offense, but without the shot making or skill on the ball that they used to have. And so, yeah, Valpo, I think, was plus 14 in offensive rebounds and plus 13 in free throw attempts against ISU this year. Still close, but I think Valpo's made for the, kind of grinder of Arch Madness and should get past ISU in that one.
Bradley, the 2 seed, awaits the winner of that game. Bradley's a weird team. I mean, Jaquan Johnson is, probably the guy if you want to ride a guy that's like, hey, I'm going to ride this one guy to carry me to a title. It could be him, just running their offense, the heavy pick and roll offense. And Alex Hubrex is an elite shooter. They don't have much other help like consistently than that. And the weirdest thing about Bradley is since January 1, they're 199th per Torvik in road games, but they're shooting 41% from three. They're 77th at home, but they're only shooting 33% from three, which just shows you they've been so much better at home, but they've shot 8% worse from three. Doesn't make much sense to me. What's your take on this Bradley team? And then can Valpo give them a run?
Yeah, you noted it. There's just not much offense outside of like Jaquan Johnson ball screens and Hubrick's hitting threes. That they don't produce anything at the rim, which is troubling. As we note the poor Arch Madness perimeter shooting again. And yeah, I think Valpo is a physical team that can give them some issues, but they also are not good in ball screen coverage. So, Johnson can do his thing, I think, and they can Bradley doesn't turn the ball over really. They're not going to, do anything crazy to help a poor Valpo, what's a, pretty inefficient mid-range reliant offense. So, I think they can outgrind Valpo in that one.
All right, let's move to the bottom half of the bottom. We're going to just cross off Evansville.
Yeah.
We're moving Northern Iowa on. Northern Iowa is the second favorite despite having to win 4 games in 4 days, and they don't have great depth, but This is a team. They've been the best in the league since February 1st. The reason I bring that date up, some Tristan Smith came back. Elite man-to-man defense. They play slow. They allow nothing in transition. But Tristan Smith came back, but they're also shooting 40% from three in February, which I'm not sure they can maintain. But this is a very connected group. They're third in minutes continuity coming into the year, and they're the second favorite despite opening the tournament on Thursday against Evansville. Northern Iowa, Illinois State. Illinois State's another team that's, if you look, they're Jekyll and Hyde, home and away. It'd be funny if we get Illinois State Bradley, by the way, two teams that have been much better at home. They're 363rd in consistency, 365th in away from home per Haslametrics. They can be turned over at times. I think they missed Banks in that aspect. But this is like, so I think, can Northern Iowa win 4 games in 4 days? And if it's going to be, but if it's going to be Illinois State, can Walker, number one, stay on the floor? And number two, does he have like the stamina? And he had dealt with injuries down because they're so much better with Chase Walker in there. It's Chase Walker, shooters around. So it's a very experienced team as well. They were top 15 in minutes continuity. So what do you make of Illinois State, Northern Iowa? I think that game is so fascinating. Both games were super close. I think Illinois State swept them during the regular season. What do you make of that game? And is Northern Iowa the deserved second favorite here, despite playing on Thursday?
Yeah, I mean, I get the process of why Northern people are, onto Northern Iowa. As you mentioned, they kind of hit rock bottom in mid-January with all the injuries. They've gone 7-4 since then. 3 of those losses by one possession, or one or two possessions. So yeah, I understand it. But as you mentioned, swept by Illinois State this year. Chase Walker struggled with the pack line double teams the first go round. Then he figured out how to pass out of them, and I think he had 5 assists in the second meeting. So, Northern Iowa is going to force you to beat them over the top, but Walker really did figure out how to, navigate those doubles the second meeting. So I do lean Illinois State to advance from that one.
And what would be helpful if Kinzinger can make some threes again. What's happened to him?
Yeah, right. Horrible year.
My main question for you: if you had a 3-point contest, who are you taking, Hubrex or Lundblade?
I think Hubrex has the best form in the Valley. I think I'm taking Hubrex.
Two amazing shooters. We want to watch some shooters who
Absolutely.
can get red hot in the Valley. All right, so if it's Bradley, Illinois State, two teams that are Jekyll and Hyde, home and away, now playing on a neutral court, I think Bradley predictably against Illinois State and UNI won at home and lost on the road to both those teams. What happens there? And who's the biggest threat to Belmont? If you think Belmont's getting out of the top, who would give Belmont the biggest issues from the bottom half?
Well, yeah, let's start with Bradley, Illinois State. I think Jaquan Johnson dropped 23 on him against their drop coverage when Walker was out. So, obviously his presence defensively makes a big difference in terms of that. And so that's why I would kind of lean Illinois State to advance out of the bottom half. And against Belmont, that becomes problematic. Chase Walker then becomes a little bit of a defensive issue against Belmont's spacing and ability to pretty much destroy all drop coverage they saw this year because of that.
And then that becomes, but Illinois State, that's just going to become in the third game in 3 days. They're going to have to make threes against Belmont, right? Pretty much. Is that it? All it comes down to?
Right. And then, as you noted earlier, you got Chase Walker's conditioning issues, which, interestingly, I think, let me see how many minutes he played.
Well, they won't matter if he fouled out in 11 minutes and they went against Belmont in the finale.
Exactly. I was going to say, I think he only played about 10 minutes in that one. And you could see their spacing improve and their ability to get out on Belmont's shooters improve as well when he did foul out. So he's kind of this polarizing figure for them. He is, like, you look at the on-off numbers, it's just wild how much better they are with him on the court. But then I also like, I hate to say the eye test, but you watch their when he's off the floor, their spacing, their ball movement improves a lot too when he's gone. So it's an interesting contrast, and I think he actually is a bit of a detriment if they do face Belmont again in the finals if he's staying on the floor.
Yeah. Because then you just go smaller and shoot threes
Yeah,
and hope you're on, right?
right. I think they played last year as well, right? Wasn't Belmont up something insane in the quarterfinals or the yeah? I think that was the game they were up like 50-20 or something like that at one point.
Yeah,
And Chase,
46-18, I think.
yeah, and Chase Walker was huffing and puffing up and down the court.
Yep. That would be my yeah. That is definitely enigmatic. Depending on the matchup, is like how much do you want Chase Walker? I mean, an incredible player. I mean, like you just
Yeah,
look at like
right.
the on off and like he's the most important offensive and defensive player, but in certain matchups, it might
Right.
not be ideal to have him on the court for as
Yeah,
long as
and
you.
then against Bradley when he was off the court, Bradley destroyed him. That's like the only time Bradley has scored efficiently at the rim all Valley season. And Jaquan Johnson was unguardable. He was eating everything up at the mid range without Walker there. So it's you know certain matchups he's indispensable, and then against Belmont, he becomes a little bit of an anchor.
Final prediction:
Belmont, Belmont over Illinois State.
Belmont, a team that can make and with their shot making, they can upset someone, right? And the
Absolutely,
Valley's,
yeah.
yeah,
And like I said, the improvement at the rim and then the front court, like just being able to finish around the rim more efficiently this year, huge difference.
yeah, and being able to defend at the rim. Like
Exactly.
a lot of these like shot making outfits from like the Summit. The reason these teams they go in like the Big Sky, like they just can't defend when they get to the when they
Oh
step
yeah,
up.
yeah. It's a total mismatch at the rim every time.
Like I want to see St. Thomas just because I love St. Thomas and I love Bjerke, but like they would get depending on they'd have to play like Nebraska,
Yeah,
otherwise,
right.
and then they just make it a 3-point contest.
So, yeah, and those are essentially the same offense as St. Thomas and Nebraska.
Yeah, Janowski revenge game. Um, but otherwise they'll just get bludgeoned. But all right, I appreciate you. I'm gonna say if I'm looking for a flyer, there's something about UIC with Crawford, but Belmont will have to have an off shooting night for them to
Yeah,
beat them. But maybe SIU can do the dirty work.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I could see that. I think that's the big kink in the hose there. If you're trying to map out an up, a surprise Valley winner, it would be SIU setting that first domino with a win over Belmont.
SIU, UIC, semi would I'm looking at their what were their scores? I was gonna say that total might open 74. Kidding. But that would be a absolute grinder.
Yeah,
All right, appreciate you, Jordan, for joining me. Check him out at Jor Cubsdan on Twitter. Does amazing work. All through March, you're going to want to read what he's putting out. No one covers the sport better. Appreciate you, brother. Enjoy the madness.
yeah. Thanks for having me on again.
Thanks, Jordan. And I'll throw it to myself for a conversation I have with Sam Federman. All right, now joined by the one and only Sam Federman, who I just when I hear MAAC basketball, this is who I think of. I hear you mentioned on the broadcast all the time too. And I can tell you this is how I can't believe I missed this DM. But you want to know how this is just describes you perfectly. You DM'd me in 2022. Can I get your Flow Hoops login for Iona Santa Clara? If I saw it, I would have happily given it to you. That was what you DM'd me for. It was at late night on November 23rd, 2022.
I do not
Sam,
remember DMing you that, but I very much remember that game.
I
Um,
don't remember that game.
it was the Patino Iona team. They'd only played like 3 games to that point, and so like any film on them was going to be really important. The game started at midnight, and they lost to that was the Brandon Majewski Santa Clara team.
Ah, got it.
But
Yeah, I'm looking at that game right now.
yeah, but I do not remember DMing you that. Like I do remember like trying to figure out how to watch that game.
Yeah, Flow Hoops is it's something.
Yeah.
I used to be able to share it. I can't really share it now. They like crack down
Yeah.
on sharing your logins. But we're here today to talk about the MAAC in Atlantic City. But let's dive in to the bracket. Merrimack is the favorite, and they won the regular season outright by a
Three
few,
games.
3 games. They are known for a very, very unique zone, and under Joe Gallo is a hell of a coach. And it's not your typical zone. I mean, it's a zone that is very aggressive. They take away the three. They look to generate turnovers, and they can have some teams in this conference in complete pretzels. Offensively, and their defense. I mean, Bronya, he's very underrated on the defensive end. And then you have KC, who is so long, great at the rim. I assume he's okay, right? He didn't
He'll
play the
he'll be
finale.
playing this weekend. It was an ankle. They wanted to rest him. They'd already won the conference title. He warmed up on Sunday. Um, he's gonna play.
Okay. Yeah, Ugokazi should be good to go. Then you have, Marrero, who'll make your. It seems like he's like just a clutch shot maker, but their offense is really run by two Philly guards, and there's a Philly connection to Joe Gallo with Ernest Shelton and Kavar Kennedy. I think a major storyline in Atlantic City is what kind of whistle is Kennedy going to get? I mean, he gets a very friendly whistle a lot of games, right? But I mean, he's so good at getting into the lane and getting to the line. That's like Merrimack's offense when they like need a bucket, need some points. It's him getting into the lane and getting to the line. What kind of whistle is he going to get? Because he can take over a game by not only getting points there, because he seemingly never misses at the line, but two, getting opposing guards into and big sometimes into foul trouble. I mean, I look back to that Siena game when Justice Schultz played 11 minutes and fouled out, a guy who never fouls. They had that game against Quinnipiac. Very bizarre in that Quinnipiac game when Asim Jones, their senior point guard, he got in foul trouble and only
Yeah.
played like they just didn't play him the whole game,
Yeah,
and
I mean,
they
I
played
was
Ty
there.
Turnage.
Sim Jones picked up a dumb foul in the first minute of the game, and then he picked up another foul in like a minute, like a couple minutes later. And TP sits guys with two fouls, and then he just didn't want to mess with the flow of the offense or the defense at that point in the second half. And Ty Turnage was kind of actually playing pretty well in that game. But yeah, I would have gone back to Asim Jones when they needed points at that point because Asim Jones, as we saw yesterday on Sunday, kind of willed Quinnipiac back to win that game against Canisius. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
just feel like you can't. It's hard to have against that zone to go with your freshman point guard over. I mean, who? I mean, he only finished with what 2 points in like 38 minutes over your
yeah,
seat. Like you
and
just
like I thought he played fine, but in the second half he wasted a couple of possessions for them, and that's something that maybe a freshman point guard that plays for a fast-paced team against in a game where it's like that, it's really difficult. But yeah, you mentioned it with Kennedy and the whistle that he gets. Jerry McNamara talked about this after the Cincinnati game. He was like, "Oh man, he gets 16 free throws." Like the guy's in the paint on every possession. Like he's gonna get fouled. He's going to win Conference Player of the Year. He led the league in scoring during conference play because whenever he wanted to, he's in the paint. He's fast. He blows by guys and he understands leverage in terms of how to get himself to draw contact. My
he's like the
favorite thing
mag
about
version of like SGA when he plays.
Yeah, no, my favorite thing about his offense, and especially like because early career SGA before the 3-point shot came along, but obviously much smaller of a player. He's
Yeah.
listed 6'2". I don't think he's 6'2", um, but that doesn't mean he's not great. What I would say about Kaver is something that he's always able to do at a high level is even if it's kind of getting walled off for 20 seconds or for 10 seconds, he'll find his way into the lane at the end of a possession to create something.
Yeah. Yeah. If there's nothing going. that's set a screen for him. He gets into the lane, gets to the bucket, a lot of times gets to the line. Well, let's take a look at the field. Merrimack is the favorite, as I mentioned, around 3-1 to win the tournament. They didn't get an easy draw in that they're going to play the winner of Iona Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart was 50-1 to win the league. Their defense is really bad on the perimeter and at the rim. They are the best three-point shooting team in the league, but they just can't seem to figure out the Merrimack zone. Iona is the more interesting team. They're at 18-1. On the surface, you would be like, they don't match up well with Merrimack because they're not great on the offensive glass, and Merrimack will get demolished on the glass in games. One, because they don't go after the offensive rebound, and then two, because they're in a zone, you can get a lot of offensive rebounds on them. But Merrimack just they have shot makers. They seem to know how to attack that zone. They could have swept Merrimack. They beat them in the first meeting. The second meeting was a thrower that went to double overtime. First question, Sabali and Angland, are they good to go, or is that questionable?
From what I heard, it was mostly just resting,
Okay,
like precautionary stuff. Obviously, they didn't have anything to play for on Sunday. Obviously, it's a huge rivalry, but they were locked into the 8 seed. Um, I'm not as certain on that, and I haven't reached out to Dan Giroux in the last day or so because his wife just went into labor,
mm.
which may be something to factor in. I don't know what their records are for coaches who are just coming off of their wife giving birth heading into the conference tournament. That would be a very ESPN stat to find.
But
Uh,
that's a tough to get it. Drawing Iona as the one seed in your first game is based on how they've played this year. That's not a great the best draw.
but yeah, you mentioned it with the rebounding. Yeah, Iona's not a great offensive rebounding team, but Merrimack they're not a good rebounding team in general, to the point where it honestly benefits the teams that don't already get a ton of offensive rebounds.
Fair.
It offers them more offensive opportunities that they don't usually have. Um,
Like a really good offensive rebounding team is getting them anyway, so it's like who cares that you're getting a bunch against Merrimack? You're usually getting them anyway. I get what you're
yes.
saying.
And because you're already creating those opportunities. Iona's offense has struggled on first shot, and they're not getting second shots. Actually, they don't struggle a ton on first shots. They actually make a bunch of shots. That's kind of the one thing that they, over the course of the season, have been doing for the most part offensively. But they turn it over. They don't draw fouls, and they don't get offensive rebounds. Well, they're going to get offensive rebounds against Merrimack. Everyone does. So they're going to get those extra opportunities, and they're a good scoring team. They have plenty of shooters. Toby Harris, Luke Jungers, both shooting over 40%.
CJ
Koji
Anthony,
Akametu.
who went nuts the last time they played, he's also
Yeah,
totally
CJ
capable.
Anthony is an incredible point guard, even though he's had the turnover issues over the last 2 games, which again could be something to note against the Merrimack zone. Although he did not play well in the win against Merrimack, so they have other guys. And Koji Akametu is playing his best basketball of the season right now, most consistent basketball of the season.
Yeah, he played well that last meeting against Merrimack
Yeah,
in
he
the
had
middle of
18
that
in that.
zone.
Sorry, he had 16 in that game, 22 against Ryder, 15 against Manhattan. Athletic guy, can slash off the wing, has a little bit of a handle as well. So I think that he's the X factor difference maker for Iona. Obviously, you're going to need Harris and Jungers to make shots, but
Yep.
he's the X factor and a difference maker for them in this conference tournament, in my opinion.
Yeah. So do you think the injuries are and some of the offensive limitations for Maris are just too much to overcome?
I mean, look, Schofield and Watson are like the two guys that I think are like kind of zone killers for them because you can just throw it into like 12 feet and they can go score from there. And they can find a dunker spot. They can find the high post guy. Like Schofield, you just throw it into him and he'll give up a lot defensively, but he'll score 16 points in 16 minutes. Watson's kind of got the same way in some sense. So I do think you lose a lot of that, and so much of the offense is now relying on Rajon Blackwell and Justin Menard, two guys that are good, but Blackwell has been really inconsistent recently. Menard, I think he's a really good player, and has shown the ability to hit big shots over the course of the year, but has also shown the ability to kind of take some shots that maybe he doesn't need to in certain spots. I thought their offense was pressing on Sunday against St. Peter's. And Jaden Collins-Roberts does play his best basketball in Atlantic City. That is something to keep an eye on. But I do think the size is going to catch up to them at some point, and I think mostly just the lack of a ton of scoring options is going to catch up to them. I just look at this roster and say, hey, like unless Miles Parker comes out and hits a bunch of shots and he struggles defensively, and then obviously you need Menard and Blackwell to play well and JCR to play well. I, Marist to me really struggling right now, and Quinnipiac, I mean, they're struggling too. They came into the Canisius game losers of three in a row. Amari Monroe had an ice bag on his left on his right knee after the Niagara game that he didn't play the last 9 minutes and 23 seconds of regulation or in overtime, and then he sat out the Canisius game. So we're still waiting to hear the status on him. I would be surprised if he didn't give it a go. Um,
But he might not be 100%.
yeah, and that's kind of what I'm looking at here. Quinnipiac has a lot of different guys that can score. I don't think that would be the end of the world for them, the way that having three guys out for Marist is too difficult to overcome. Um, like a Sim Jones can get you a bucket. Jaden Zimmerman can get you a bucket. Keith McKnight, you can throw it into him and he'll be really physical. I think he's the type of guy that has the sort of physicality that I'm not sure Marist right now has the bodies to put up with a ton.
But let's focus on the bottom half. You have the first round game between Fairfield and Manhattan. Fairfield, very, very young team. Solid inside out duo with Sparks and Benjamin and Manhattan, who's 160 to 1. I don't have many great things to say about this Manhattan team. I mean, their defense is pretty bad. Their offense is like mid-range based, and they basically haven't beat anyone with a pulse in months.
No.
But the winner of that game will take on St. Peter's, who is they're going to press, they're going to zone, as we mentioned before. They have a very solid defense. Their half court offense is pretty ugly, but basically they just want to get the ball up on the rim and then get after the offensive glass and then get to the line and get second chance points. And they did sweep Fairfield and Manhattan. Any threat to St. Peter's, or do you think that they advance to the semis?
Of the four matchups where we know like who's going to be playing who, Fairfield over Manhattan is probably the one I'm most confident
Yep.
in. You mentioned it. Manhattan hasn't beaten anyone good in a long time. I was there when they beat Quinnipiac on January 2nd. Like they haven't.
That's the last time they beat anyone in this field, right?
No, they beat Sacred Heart on February 7th.
Okay.
But that's the 9 seed.
The 9 seed,
They
yeah.
they haven't beat they haven't beaten a top 8 seed in a long time. And Fairfield's obviously playing really good basketball. Brandon Benjamin um, missed the Siena game, came back for the Mount game. Um, he'll be back up to 100% for the weekend for Thursday. I would imagine. Fairfield, really good team on the glass, but with Benjamin and Declan Walker-Fennig. Their bench has really come along as well because the starters are good, the freshmen are good, but the bench has really come along with Eric Mejia and Deuce Turner playing well. Isaac Munkati gave them two really good performances when Benjamin didn't play against in the second half against Quinnipiac and then in the Siena game as well. So I would say that, but what's the game that Fairfield has struggled the most in over the last month and a half? That would be St. Peter's away. Obviously, aside from the Mount this weekend, that would be St. Peter's away when they really struggled with the zone, got down by 28, and they finally kind of started throwing it into the middle later in the second half of that game and started scoring. We'll have to see if that's an approach that they can get to throughout the course of the game because I do think they have some skilled guys that they can kind of put in the middle. But man, St. Peter's can pressure you at a really high level. They can make you really uncomfortable. They throw different defenses at you. It's not just the zone. It's like three or four different zones that they can throw at you, and that's kind of what makes them the chameleon team of the conference. They'll start in that press man. They'll press off of made baskets, but they'll drop back into kind of different acting zones, similar shells, They can
which,
do different
which
things
can be
out of
tough
it.
in a tournament setting, a quick
Yeah,
turnaround
and
with
and
critical
they've
threat.
mastered that over the course of the year. And I think Bashir Mason has done a really, really good job of knowing when to swap to the zone. And I've asked him throughout the year, like, hey, when do you know when to go to the zone, when to go to the man? And he just says it's a feel thing. Like there's no secret formula for him. It's a feel thing, and he's had a really good pulse on that all the season long.
So yeah, it could be tough in a tournament setting. The other game, Siena Mount, man. So when this before this bracket came out last week, I said I'm betting Siena to win the conference tournament. They had Merrimack. They seemed to figure out how to attack that zone, and they really had Merrimack beaten. They lost in overtime, but now they get Mount, a surging Mount team, is playing really well. Now, part of that is with
Hasn't really
Mount
played anyone.
is teams have not made a three. I mean, since February 1st, teams are shooting 28% on super high volume because they will give up a ton of threes. But they have a solid defense. They'll press some. They do have some turnover issues, and they can't shoot free throws. But they're playing better. They're at 15-1. And then you have Siena, who I love. I love Gavin Doty. And when clicking, this is the best offense, in my opinion, in the
It is.
league. But you now have this wrench that got thrown into everything with Antonio Chandler, who I think is super important, especially if they were to face Merrimack. I think he's like really important against the zone. And, they can use him in the middle. But this is a team, they're really good in the mid range. They just can't, if they could just start making threes. And I don't know what happened to Brendan Coyle. Now he hit five threes in his last game, but this guy was like a 40% 3-point shooter last year. He can't make a three this year. But now, without Chandler, you need Coyle to step up, and he's a different kind of player. You need him to make threes. But that really hurts your depth. And you're going to have to win, what, 3 games in 4 days? This is a team that already wasn't deep. And now, like, if Chandler doesn't come back, I mean, are they even go? Like, they're just going to play five guys. Like, they don't even, I think in their final game, they played
Henderson
20.
will probably play. You'll see a little bit of Jones, I'm sure, but it'll mostly be the main five.
Yeah, and then yes, you just mentioned two freshmen, so like that could be problematic. In now, fortunately for them, they do play slow, so that helps a little bit.
They are so dominant inside the arc offensively. We saw this in so many of the games that they just put like 65, 70% performances inside the arc because they can find full effect. Their guards are so good in the mid range. I think
Yeah,
Doty and Schultz are two of the best mid range guards in the conference, maybe the two best mid range guards in the conference. But Chandler was also a huge part of that. That's a 74% inside the arc guy in conference play, number one in the conference. Losing him is really tough. And they beat the Mount earlier this year. Chandler did not have a big performance in that game. But again, interesting. Remember to note the Mount has been forcing more turnovers recently. That's not something that Siena necessarily struggles with. But it was something that the Mount had really, really struggled with. Mount's turnover margin was at the very bottom of the sport, and still near there. But they've kind of been a little bit better with that recently. They have Luke McElden, who to me is one of the few true like full size big men in this league. And we saw Trey DeVoe play really well. They need AK Kebe at his full health. AK Kebe, there's no update as of Monday night on him. I'm waiting to hear from Mount St. Mary's on that. I'm not sure I'll know anything on AK Kebe until Saturday. I didn't know about Carmelo Pacheco until 15 minutes before tip off on of the MAAC tournament last year. So who knows what we'll know about that, but they need him to make a MAAC tournament run because he might be the best defender in the conference. He's up there in that just simply for what he's able to do on the ball, off the ball, and on the glass.
All right, so let me ask you this: who do you think comes out of the bottom half?
If Kebe's healthy, I think I would maybe slightly lean Mount.
And especially if Chandler's out.
Yeah, I Although the wrench to throw in, St. Peter's 7-0 and I'm in attendance this year. I will be in Atlantic City. So keep an eye on that. It's hard. But I just find it hard to believe we're gonna have a chalk MAC tournament.
Yeah, that would the chalk would be surprising. Having said that,
I do think Merrimack is the most likely champion. They are um as complete in terms of their health, assuming Uguakazi's healthy, as anyone in the league right now. Um, and they were the best team all regular season.
well, from a betting perspective, I wanted Siena. I can't do it at plus 350, especially with the uncertainty on Chandler. If you're looking for a long shot, I think the only way to look is Iona because Quinnipiac and Marist they're not maybe not fully. We know Marist isn't fully healthy. Quinnipiac might not be. Iona just matches up really well with Merrimack. They'll already have played a game in that gym. Maybe that could be beneficial to them. But they have the shot makers. They really seem to understand how to attack that zone. That's such a tricky matchup for Merrimack. If you're looking for a long shot, like 20 to 1 ish on Iona, that's where I would look. I'm still going to stick to my gun. I'm going to say Siena wins it, but I don't have any
Okay.
conviction now without Chandler. Uh, Sam, I appreciate you taking the time.
I've said this before. Whatever you think you know about the conference, throw it all out the window. This was in my lead to the MAC season preview this year. It was like the number one rule of the MAC, and this is the last time I'm going to be able to call it the MAC before we change the name over the offseason, or the conference changes the name over the offseason. I tend to use the we pronouns for the league because I feel embedded within the basketball landscape, but I'm not part of the conference officially. The conference changes the name. So this is the last time I got to say the number one rule of the MAC is that nobody knows anything. And I know I just talked for 40 minutes about it, but
Yeah, I said we were
um,
going to do 15 to 20.
yeah, no, what I would say, I wouldn't discount Quinnipiac in terms of just like if you want a team that's not Merrimack or Siena to win it. Um, if Monroe is back, which I'm assuming he will be, I haven't heard anything on that, but I'm assuming that he probably will be. There's going to be some desperation there, no doubt. Um, it's his last opportunity. Tom Bakura knows that like he had his chances. He had great chances to win the last 2 years. Mari Monroe knows that. And they're as talented as any team in the conference. I wouldn't be surprised if they came out and got the job done. I don't think there's no outcome that can surprise me. I know I've said, oh, this would
Manhattan
surprise me.
winning it would surprise you.
Yes, Manhattan winning it would surprise me. It would vindicate John Gallagher, who said back in early February that he thought his team could be one of the teams that makes the big February push because he knows that someone does it every year. This year it was Fairfield, and then it was the Mount. It was not Manhattan. They did win a couple games in February, but they did not make the February push. It would vindicate John Gallagher, and I that would be great for him. It'd be great for that program. But yeah, that's the outcome that would any of the teams playing on Thursday. It would surprise me if they won the tournament.
I wouldn't be surprised if Iona won it. I'm saying that.
Okay, I get the I don't think I'd be surprised by that either, just because like it's
It's
Iona.
Iona.
Like they they were they were coming last year, and obviously Tobin gets fired, and um who knows, and you can say what you will about that, but um I don't, man, Danjero coming out and winning it would just be such an interesting storyline that throws a wrench into the entire discourse of the conference that it's only so Mac that it could happen with
Yep.
Iona, right?
Agreed.
But yeah, I would pick Merrimack if you put a gun to my head.
Okay.
That's who I picked in the Jerome.
Got it. All right. Well, Sam, I appreciate you taking the time to join me. Make sure you follow him on Twitter. Does a lot of great work, but most importantly, throughout the MAAC tournament at Sam_Federman. No one will be closer. No one will be covering it better. And if you need updates on injuries, no one will be closer to that. So who's warming up, who's not going to play, all that stuff. Now we have to worry about eligibility stuff. So make sure you check them out on Twitter. Enjoy Atlantic City and the games at Boardwalk Hall. I'll be following along. Appreciate your time, brother.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Duck. Duck and I ready to roll off the bench, start contributing here. We're going to get into some of our favorite conferences, the SoCon and the WCC. Let's start with the Southern Conference. It's produced so many Cinderellas over the years, some great stories. And this year in particular, there are 5 teams I think you can make a strong argument have a chance to cut down the nets and to punch their ticket to the big dance with the auto bid here. And the teams are basically in the market from plus 185, that's East Tennessee State as the favorite coming in, all the way down to an 8-1 Wofford, and everyone in between kind of sandwiched there at the top here. So I'll run it down the entirety of the SoCon, and then we can get into teams that we're worried about for an early exit, a potential champion, and then also a Cinderella that may be worth sprinkling some couch change on. As I mentioned, the Buccaneers plus 185, the number 1 seed in this tournament, followed by Furman at plus 425, Mercer at plus 475, Samford at plus 500, and Wofford at 8-1. The Terriers there as one of the teams that are going to be interesting to discuss because they're a 2 seed, but they're priced as the 5th team in this pecking order. KenPom loves ETSU, by the way, has them sitting at 140 in the net ratings. Wofford, by the way, if you want to get a better feel for the stretch between the first team here on the pricing board and the 5th, they're at 248th in KenPom. Then we got Western Carolina at 10-1, UNC Greensboro 35-1, Chattanooga 40-1, the Citadel 50-1, and VMI bringing up the rear at 90-1. The first round kicks off on March 6th with the 7-10 and 8-9 games, including UNC Greensboro against VMI and Chattanooga against the Citadel. The top 6 all get byes to the quarters. And then we know right away we're getting Mercer Western in that quarterfinal, as well as Furman against Samford. Every game is going to be played at the Harrah's Cherokee Center in Asheville, North Carolina. All right, Duck, let me bring you in here. Let's start talking about some higher seeds that we're worried about potentially losing. I know that this particular league protects their top seeds a little bit, but clearly not as much as a Sun Belt or a WCC where they lay out the red carpet and then move teams all the way up to the semifinals. So talk to me about a team, either from a metrics perspective, momentum, injuries, for whatever reason. Who are you concerned as for one of the top teams for a potential early exit?
Well, let's take a look at the tournament for a minute here, and I want to talk about the talent of this league. I think NIL and the portal have dissected and damaged this conference significantly over the last few seasons. It was just a few short years ago when Furman was knocking off UVA in the NCAA tournament. If you've seen the clip, it looks like Stan Van Gundy lost his life savings on that one. Samford putting a massive scare into Kansas in the NCAA tournament. It just seems like this league, whenever players start to shine and get developed and stand out, they get plucked away by bigger schools. And the result has now been what was once a top 2 or 3 mid-major league. This league's fallen all the way to 23rd in KenPom. They're below the Summit League, they're below the Big South, and just barely above the A-Sun. I think if it's not ETSU that wins this league, or maybe Mercer, they're staring a 15 seed square in the nose here. I think ETSU and Wofford are probably the safest to pencil into the semis, although Wofford, just the way they've played over the last 10 games has been lackluster. Getting Kamari Holmes back is huge as he impacts the game in so many ways. I think Samford and Mercer can absolutely lose in the opening round. This league is wide open top to bottom regarding the top 7 seeds. Even UNC Greensboro has wins over Samford, Furman, Western Carolina, and Wofford this season. And with Justin Neely capable of going off for 35 and 15 against anybody in this league, the amount of parity in the league causes the margins to be razor thin. I think if you like Furman, Mercer, or Samford, you might be better off running the numbers on a money line rollover. You're going to end up with 3 likely pick'em games, if not finding those teams in underdog situations. Honestly, as far as top seeds to worry about, I think anybody 2 through 6 could get bounced early. I wouldn't be stunned if Wofford were to lose in their opening game as long as it's UNCG that moves through. I could see Samford losing. I could see Mercer losing. There's so much parity. All 3 of these first round games are going to be very, very close to pick 'em. Any one of them could lose.
Yeah, in terms of a top seed that I'm worried about, it's Mercer as the 4. A big part of these low major leagues I'm not necessarily looking at your overall metrics. I want to know how you played in the month of February. And if you go to Bart Torvik's website, it's a free tool. You can change, the start date and end date to be able to look at windows of time. The Bears finished 4-4 down the stretch. Their defense fell off a cliff, though, 298th in Torvik since February 1st in terms of their defense. They also looked vulnerable on the road, finishing 1-4 straight up away from home, with their only win coming over the Citadel, which is one of the worst teams in this league. Baraka Okoje is the offensive engine for Ryan Ritter and this Bear team, but his entire game is based on driving, getting into the lane, making some shots inside of 10 feet, and getting to the line a lot. He's very crafty. He hits you with the floaters, the step backs, the fadeaways. But when he takes somebody off the dribble, number one priority is initiating contact, getting that whistle, and getting to the line. He takes 9 foul shots per game, which leads the conference. But Mercer is drawing Western Carolina first, and here's what I like about the Catamounts and why I think this is an early upset opportunity. The Catamounts rebound the ball really well, and their defense has gone through a massive transformation. They were fouling way too much early in the year, giving up way too much in transition as well when they started 8-15 straight up. But they made some tweaks to their defense as well as their rotation. And in the final, stretch of the season, they finished with 6 straight wins, including a win over this very same Mercer Bear team. First 23 games, 326 in total defense. The last 6, 150th. That's a big glow up for a low major team to get things turned around. And it's only about an hour from Western's campus to Asheville, so I expect a bunch of fans in the purple and gold. I want to hear your take on this because this is something that you focus in on a total perspective where you look at teams that change the tempo they're playing with or make some tweaks on offense or defense, and all of a sudden it has a big impact on the total points scored. Western has to be one of those teams that you have your eye on.
I mean, they're just so hot down the stretch. They've played really great offensive basketball. It just all seems to be coming together for this group, and they're peaking at the right time. And guys like Marcus Kell, Cord Stanberry, they can impact the game on offense so well. Really, the defense has stepped up a little bit here the last 5 or 6 games of the season for Western Carolina as well. I think, and we'll get into this a little bit later when we talk about long shots. You're talking about a 72-hour event determining who goes to the NCAA tournament. At some point, you want to be riding the hot hand, and Western Carolina is a team that has been playing incredible. They've been beating good opponents. They swept East Tennessee State in the regular season. I think that the Catamounts are very dangerous in this tournament.
All right, who do you actually think is going to win, or do you think potentially it's the best combination of the potential to cut down the nets and the price?
I mean, I do think ETSU has been the best defensive unit in this conference, and I think that will travel here. They're first in overall defensive efficiency in the SoCon. They're tops in forcing opponent turnovers, best at blocking and altering shots and creating opportunities on the other end. You look at the guys they brought in this year: Cam Morris, Brian Taylor, Blake Barkley, Jalen Smith. This is what these guys were brought in for, was to win this tournament and get ETSU back to the dance. They have the most top-end talent in the league, do the Buccaneers. They have a clear path, but this is a wide open tournament. So I believe there are 6 or 7 teams that could win this entire thing, but my money's on ETSU to win it.
I'm going to go with Wofford at 8-1 as the 2 seed here. Wofford knocked off all the top competition this season at least once, handing East Tennessee State, Mercer, and Sanford regular season losses. And 3 of their late season losses in SoCon play came without Holmes in the lineup, who was sidelined due to injury. Not only is he their leading scorer with over 19 points per game, but he's an invaluable rebounder, one of the best rebounding guards in the country, nearly 6 rips per game. So having him back really helped to keep opponents off of the offensive glass. With them back at full strength, I think Kevin Giltner is really going to be able to lead them at least to the semis. I think it's going to be, a bit of a cakewalk for them there. And then the rest of it, I think, kind of comes down to familiarity and confidence from last year. They cut down the nets as the 6 seed. Now they're up to the 2 seed here. And as I mentioned, in terms of, making it to the semis, what I want is a team that will not beat itself. And Wofford has one of the lowest turnover rates in the entire nation. And according to Haslam Metrics, they were the 10th rated low major in college basketball in terms of performance away from home. You basically need to throw out for all these low major teams at this point how they played on their home floor. It has little to no impact. You really want to zero in on how teams played on neutral floors and away from home. And because of that consistency with handling the basketball and having their top scorers back and healthy at the right time, I think Wofford is undervalued here. I'm surprised to see a 2 seed graded out at 8-1, 5th in the pecking order. I think there's a lot of positives stacking up, so I'm going to go ahead and take a shot there. Now, we talked about Western. They're your pick as, I call it the roulette chip. You're trying to call your number here on the table. 12-1 is a pretty good payout. 10-1 in some markets, always important to shop around, get the best number possible to extract value out of it. I already made a quick case for their defense playing so much better, but you also think their offense has an opportunity to carry them at the right time.
I think so. I mean, just such a hot team down the stretch. They swept ETSU in the regular season. Likely, if they were to advance past Mercer, who they just beat last week, they would play the Buccaneers, who they've beaten twice already this season. This is the best offensive rebounding team in the conference. Abdoulaye Fantakaba and Tayshaun Smith are magnets on the glass. Again, Cord Stansberry and Marcus Kell can go for 20 points against anybody in this league. This team is hot right now. Again, in a 72-hour event where you've got to win 3 games, I want to bet on the hot hand. So I definitely think there's value in Western Carolina. I also do like who you plan to talk about as well. So I'll be interested to hear your breakdown on them.
All right, UNC Greensboro, 7 seed, 35-1. Let's talk potential path here for a second. VMI, they beat them. Wofford, they beat them and put up 99 points. Samford up next after that. They beat them by 7 at home. And then finally, ETSU, it was a 3-point game with under 5 minutes to play the last time out between the Spartans and the Buccaneers. So I view this as, have they shown it? Absolutely. And also, specifically, they can make three-pointers at an incredible rate. They have guys shooting over 38% from long range. They can tickle the twine from distance. They also get to the line a ton. And they have Justin Neely. He has 6, 20, and 10 double-doubles. He's the best player that you haven't watched this season as a casual college basketball fan. He's great at getting opposing bigs in foul trouble as well. If he's healthy, and I need that report closer to the tip-off of this tournament to be able to punch it in, because in his last game, limited minutes, there's no publication, that's gone on the record as to why he played so few minutes in that game. It wasn't foul trouble. They certainly needed him on the floor. Is he injured? Is he banged up? Are they saving him? Because if he's a go, if he has the full green light, I think 35-1 is worth a shot on UNC Greensboro. As I said, I want to see proof that you can play with the best teams in the league, and they've done that for the majority of this season. What's your take on a team that's clearly unbalanced, in terms of their performance? It's been uneven at times, and to win this many games in this many days, you're asking for a lot, but 35-1, if you get them to the finals, obviously it's a printing press.
Yeah, and I mean, you just look at a team that struggled early on in the season trying to get acclimated to the system and the new players that came into the program. Justin Neely very well may be the player of the year in the Southern Conference this season. And they should not have any trouble with VMI. And I just look at a group that's at this price point, a team that has shown that they can beat teams like Furman, Wofford, Western Carolina this season. They have pieces that can make a run in this tournament. I don't think that any of the top 4 seeds are unbeatable, truly. And so you're looking at a price point, you're looking at a team that'll have an opportunity to win a couple of games and get to the final, and then you'll be able to assess where you're at on the wager. 35-1 is absolutely a play. I think these guys will have an opportunity to play a really close game against Wofford. There's no reason they can't beat Wofford. So they've already done it recently, 2 weeks ago. I think that Greensboro will have an opportunity to give themselves a chance to win a game. And then at that point, he'll be in an equity position on the wager. So 35-1 with the best player in the conference, a team that's been hot down the stretch. I think it's a value play.
We now turn to the going away party for Mark Few and his Zags, the final ride in the WCC for the conference tournament before they head off to the Pac-10, 12, 16, whatever they're going to end up calling it. They're going off as the favorite here, GU minus 155, followed by St. Mary's plus 230, Santa Clara plus 650. And then things get really juicy. 120-1 for San Francisco, 170-1 for Oregon State, 180-1 for Seattle, Pacific and Wazoo 250-1, Loyola Marymount 800-1, as well as Portland 800-1, Pepperdine 800-1, and 1,000-1 if you're feeling extra spicy on the Toreros of San Diego. A very unique tournament setup. We've talked about this for years, and they've done so much to protect their top teams and send their best teams to March Madness, and it's really worked out because what they do is they have teams clustered in packs of 2 for the buys. The Zags is the 1 seed. They split the regular season crown with St. Mary's, but thanks to a 2-0 record over Santa Clara as a tiebreaker, they go off as number one. They're paired with St. Mary's. They immediately move up to the semifinals. Then you have Santa Clara and Oregon State with a bye to the quarters, San Francisco and Pacific with a bye to the third round, Seattle and Wazoo a bye to the second round, and then we open with Portland versus Pepperdine and Loyola versus San Diego in the first round. All games played in the Orleans Arena in Paradise, Nevada, just outside of Las Vegas. All right. The format here doesn't exactly work because I don't know if I'm necessarily concerned about the top seeds, whether it be St. Mary's or the Zags losing early. But if you had to put a spin on a team that, you're concerned about how they're playing headed into the WCC, where do you land there, Duck?
Well, this is kind of a fun format, and this is the originality of the format. West Coast Conference has been doing this for years. The Sun Belt has taken a lot of flack this year for their tournament format mirroring this one, but this is kind of where it all started. And that format really necessitates the favorites not seeing an early exit. I like this format in this league because it rewards the success in the regular season and the league is top heavy. So I don't have a lot of concerns about a top seed early exit. However, if you look at the bottom of the bracket and the teams that'll be playing early, Pepperdine swept Portland and just defeated Wazoo last Saturday. We all know about the up-tempo style, and they've scrapped playing defense, and the offense for the Waves has adjusted nicely to it. These guys can absolutely win 2 or 3 games in this tournament. They could end up playing San Francisco later on in the tournament. We saw Pepperdine do this exact same thing last year, where they defeated Portland, Oregon State, and Santa Clara in this event after going just 4-14 in the regular season and league play. Others of note, though, Pacific is just really struggling down the stretch. They're too reliant on Elias Ralph and TJ Wainwright. These guys have lost 6 of 8 coming into this tournament, and they could have lost against Loyola Marymount. They were down by 10 in the first half. They mounted a comeback. I would say, you look at San Diego, Loyola Marymount, Seattle, any one of those teams can beat Pacific. So early exit, a team that might bow out earlier than expected, I would say is Pacific. Mute.
Three, two, one. Yeah, as I mentioned, worry is a strong word. Could Santa Clara upset St. Mary's? Of course. St. Mary's is comfortably in the field, looking at probably a 7 seed. If they were to go ahead and win this thing, beat Santa Clara, beat the Zags, potentially they could push up to a 6. It's not necessarily a desperation situation, but Santa Clara is playing with desperation because they're one of the last 4 teams in the field by most projections. They're going to draw the winner of Seattle against Pacific. They drilled the Red Hawks and Tigers by double digits in all 3 games. They split with St. Mary's this year, winning by 8 in a low-scoring game at home. And then in the rematch in Moraga, they got away, it got away from them late. And, it was kind of a game for the Gales where everything was clicking offensively. They end up losing that game 86-67. Santa Clara can absolutely beat SMC, in my opinion. Even, Evan Mia has a conference semifinal between the two of them graded out in a hypothetical matchup as the Gales lay in 3.5. So that's just giving you a bit of a feel for what the market is going to point to. I lean towards taking the points there. I think clearly, if St. Mary's has their way, it's going to be a lower scoring game. And Santa Clara has proven that they can win a lower scoring game against the Gales as they did earlier this season. So in terms of an early exit, I'm looking straight past Mark Few and, the Zags. But St. Mary's, I think you can make a case for it. Also, the emotion coming off of that final regular season game against the Zags, winning on their home floor, playing basically a perfect 40 minutes of basketball. That's got to feel great. It's got to be a little bit difficult for Randy Bennett's team not to feel good about themselves and potentially take their foot off the accelerator, even if it's just the first 10 minutes against Santa Clara. The Broncos are good enough to take advantage of a team kind of sleepwalking early against them. Any thoughts there on that side of the bracket?
I mean, it's going to be such a fascinating matchup. I hope it's Santa Clara and St. Mary's. And Santa Clara has a team that's played their way onto the bubble, and I think they need to win a couple of games here in this tournament to solidify their position. But very, very dangerous team offensively. Herb Sendek has his guys playing really, really good basketball, and they can absolutely. They're a team that could win this whole thing if they were to get hot and have the right situation fall into their lap. But it's really a 3-horse race. I think it's them, St. Mary's, and Gonzaga that it comes down to. But yeah, it should be really fun to see how this plays through into the late stages of this tournament.
For who I have winning it, it's boring. It's not sexy, but this price is not right. Minus 155. Give me the Zags there. Mark Few has won 8 of the last 10 WCC Conference Tournament championships. They avoid Santa Clara in the semis. They're going to get, as we mentioned, San Francisco or Oregon State. That's a red carpet to the title game, in my opinion. Graham Ike, by the way, was in desperate need of a break. His usage and minutes absolutely spiked later in the season when Huff was out. Now you get him with a full tank. I think he'll be ready to roll. No one can make a shot outside of him against St. Mary's in that regular season final, which was already a bear trap to begin with. SMC plays their balls off. The rest of the team, not named EK, shot 15 for 42 from the floor. They were drawing dead when they have a night that was that disastrous shooting from the field. But Duck, I'm going to put this out here for you, a trivia question. Do you know the last time the Zags did not play in the WCC title game?
You was it 2001?
I'll put it to you this way. Michael Jordan was still playing basketball for the Chicago Bulls, and the National Player of the Year was Tim Duncan at Wake Forest. So give it another shout.
96.
The 96-97 season, just incredible. I mean, death, taxes, Zags in the title game. And back to Evan Mia's projections, by the way, and why I like laying the minus 155 and tying my money up for a few days. A Zags St. Mary's title game would probably be the Zags minus 2.5, minus 3, right in that money line range of minus 150-ish. So I'm basically getting the same thing if, I ended up waiting and it was St. Mary's. But if it's Santa Clara against Mark Few's boys, the Zags will probably go off at, minus 6.5, minus 7. Now you're getting into closer to the minus 300, minus 275 range for a money line play there in the title game. So you're going to get value. I think it's worth it. You're either going to get the same or you're going to get a decent haircut in terms of the money line price. You also like the Zags here. Anything you want to add in terms of why they should be the pick to cut down the nets?
I mean, it just looks like free entry into the final for them. I really don't see San Francisco or Oregon State threatening to knock off Gonzaga here in this situation. While the Dons did almost defeat them earlier this season, both Huff and Graham Ike were out, and the Dons hit 14 threes. Very unlikely to be replicated here for what's at stake for Gonzaga. I just do not foresee, like you mentioned, I don't foresee any better price coming up here in this tournament with Gonzaga than we're going to get here pre-flop. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Zags are 3.5, 4 point favorites over either St. Mary's or Santa Clara in the final. And so you're looking at a minus 190 on the money line after that point anyway. I think at minus 150, minus 155, we're good here on Gonzaga. This is really the pedigree, it's the consistency with this group. It's their tournament to lose.
I can only assume the only team outside of the Gales and the Zags that you could talk yourself into are the Broncos of Santa Clara at this price point. Is there any different way to attack it in terms of a rollover? It could be point spread, it could be money line, or are you just fine with the plus 650? That's enough to take a shot on them.
Well, I mean, if you're looking at a long shot, there's really not a lot here because you're talking about Gonzaga being 20-point favorites over whoever they face in the semis. And if there were to be a team like Seattle or Pacific that would come up through the other side, you're talking about the Zags being 18 to 20-point favorites over that group as well. What I think you could possibly do if you like Santa Clara is you could look at the money line rollover rather than taking the 650. They'll probably be about minus 700 or so in their first game, but then likely they're plus 175 or so in that matchup against the Gales in the semis. And then if they were to get to the final, it could be a plus 290 or plus 390 situation against Gonzaga. So if you do the math, you squeeze out much more value than just taking the plus 650. You could probably money line roll over that into about 11 to 1. That's the only other team I can possibly see conceivably winning this tournament outside of Gonzaga or St. Mary's. So that could be worth doing something there with Santa Clara, a three-stage money line rollover to squeeze out a little extra value than the plus 650. That's really the only other way I'd look as far as long shots.
All right, full on George Costanza. You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. Seattle, 180 to 1 as the 7th seed. As I mentioned in the SoCon portion of this conversation, it's all about your ceiling. How do you play when you're having your absolute best night? Now, granted, I'm not going to picture them doing it 5 days in a row, 5 straight games. But if they get an opportunity to play against a St. Mary's and or a Gonzaga, do they have that special play in them? I think Seattle does, because let's look at it. Seattle, you beat Stanford on the road. They beat Washington at home. They took the Zags to overtime at the Kennel, and they lost at home to St. Mary's by 2. That shows me right off the bat that 180 to 1 does not necessarily line up with them playing their best basketball. And they have 2 dudes I can rely on. They got Braden Maldonado, who's a flamethrower. He's got 28 points plus on 3 occasions this year, shooting 38% from 3 with a ton of attempts, high volume there. And then Will Heimbrodt, one of the best wing defenders in the entire sport, 4 stocks per game. And then former, Gonzaga June Sukio, who's a quality big, who's put it all together a few times this year, including a 20-point night in that near upset of St. Mary's. I like Seattle U. I think this is just a mispriced situation. I understand that this is priced to win the whole thing, not just to get to the title game. And you are right. It's going to be a huge number against the Zags, although I think there could be a little bit of market worry, the fact that, the Redhawks took the Zags to overtime on their home floor. If it's, any closer to 15 or 14 points and you get, a minus 1,100, 1,200, something like that on GU, yes, it's going to cost you a lot. But if you have a 180 to 1 ticket in your pocket on the other side, it's really just a liquidity kind of conversation, because you should be able to extract as much money out of it as you want in terms of the overall risk. Can they survive Pacific and then upset Santa Clara on the way? Yes to the first question. I don't think they're going to have issues with the Tigers there. And maybe they catch Santa Clara looking ahead, because it'll be their first game of the tournament. They're obviously knowing that they got to beat a St. Mary's at the very least to be on the right side of the at-large bubble conversation. So, they come in as a double-digit dog. Maybe they end up going ahead and sparking an upset there. And from there, really, this is couch change, 180 to 1. We're not advocating for a full unit. This is like a tenth of a unit kind of play, but all of a sudden you have some interesting options. As I said, I want to see what these teams did when everything came together. And Seattle U showed plenty of fight this year. The playing against the ACC, the Big Ten, winning games like that, winning, at least, the taking to 15 rounds against the Zags on their home floor. That's very impressive to me. This is a team I'm willing to take a shot on. Not a whole lot of intrigue in a league where the bracket is set up that you're going to have weak, weary legs against fresh teams. But we've seen it play out in other tournaments, certainly in the big boy leagues, where it's rest versus rust kind of a situation. And maybe they get lucky and catch Santa Clara sleeping. 181, I'm willing to find out. What are your thoughts there on a super long shot to make it at least to the semis? And then all of a sudden, at least the sports books, whoever's holding your action, gets a little sweaty.
Seattle was a team that was really motivated in the battle for Seattle. They played really well against Stanford. They played up really well. A hair inconsistent late in the season, and they did battle some injuries and some guys that were out of the fold for a little while. I will say I think Seattle is probably the only team that's playing earlier games that I could possibly see making a run to get to the semis. And so I think if you get to the semis with Seattle, you'd be in an equity position in the wager, but it's going to require them doing something very special to win against Santa Clara and St. Mary's. It would be very stunning and monumental for them to get to the final. 180 to 1. If they get to the semis, you'll be in a good position to make a little money on the wager. So I could see it, but that would be the only long shot team that I would look at here. Everybody else is just so inferior to the top 3.
Last question before we get out of here and kick it back to Stuck and the guys. In terms of your postseason format, do you like what the WCC does? Would you like to see other smaller leagues do that to get a much higher likelihood and chance of sending your best, likely either your regular season champ or a runner-up?
I like it in this league because it's such a top-heavy league and you're rewarding success. It's so hard when you have this long 30-game regular season that really matters and you're trying to assess who gets in the NCAA tournament, and the whole body of work matters. And then sometimes it just comes down to a 3-day event and a team goes cold and they lose, and you have these crazy smaller leagues that are sending their 7 seed or their 6 seed. In the MEAC or the SWAC, it doesn't matter as much because no matter who wins that league, they're going to the play-in round. But there are some teams that could be dangerous, like the Summit League, for example, is a league where you want to send your best. The Big South, you want to send your best. The Southland wants to send their best. And so I could see some other teams adopting a similar format, maybe not to this extreme, but I don't hate your top 2 getting auto buys into the semis. I think it rewards the regular season appropriately.
All right, that does it for the SoCon and the WCC. Back to you, Stuck.
All right, that'll do it for us. Thanks to Jordan. Thanks to Sam. Thanks to Duck Breeze. Most importantly, thanks to all of you for tuning in. Thanks to our producers as well. Make sure you subscribe, unsubscribe, tell a friend, tell an enemy. You know the drill. Leave a 5-star review if you get a chance. We'll be back tomorrow with 5 more. And then after that, some more all through Monday. Have you covered on all 31 conference tournaments. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you all later. Cheers.